My name is Max Miller, 26 years old. I grew up in penthouses so high they scraped the clouds, and at cocktail parties that cost more than most people's annual rent. My father is the chairman of Miller Holdings, a real estate empire that owns hundreds of skyscrapers from Manhattan to Los Angeles. People say I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, but they don't know that spoon is colder and sharper than any knife. Ever since I was a kid, painting was the only thing that truly mattered to me. I remember sneaking out of bed at night to paint under a desk lamp, each brushstroke a desperate escape from the golden cage my father built around me. But he never understood. To him, art was just a useless hobby for losers. Tonight was his 60th birthday. The mansion glowed like a mini art gallery, packed with investors, politicians, his old Harvard buddies. I stood in the corner clutching a painting, one that held all my pain, my dreams, my fears in every smear of color. I wondered, would he see me through the strokes, or just another rebellious son tarnishing his precious legacy? I stepped forward. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst out of my throat. "Dad, I painted this for you. It's..." He glanced at it, his eyes colder than the marble floor underfoot. The room went dead silent. My uncle tightened his grip on his glass. My cousin Lily, who once praised my art, looked down, avoiding my gaze. He held up the painting, barely looking at it, then let out a disgusted laugh. "Do you realize how many partners are watching? You want me to become a joke to all of Manhattan because of your worthless scribbles. You think you're some kind of Vincent van Gogh?" I froze. His words crashed over me like a rogue wave. I wanted to scream, "I don't paint to be a joke. I paint because it's my soul." But my throat was locked. Without warning, he ripped the painting into pieces, the scraps falling like dirty snow onto the shiny ballroom floor. He tossed the last shreds into the fireplace. Flames swallowed every dream, every sleepless night I'd ever poured into that canvas. "Dad, you can tear up my painting," I whispered, my voice dry as rotting wood, "but you can't tear up my dream." I heard whispers all around. Lily looked at me, her eyes full of pity, then turned away and buried her face in her boyfriend's chest. In that moment, it hit me. I was completely alone. My father stepped up, pointed a finger straight at me. His voice cut through the hall like a knife. "You're not worthy of the Miller name if you choose this filthy path. I don't want to see you ever again. Get out." It wasn't just a knife to the heart. It felt like he carved the word worthless into my forehead for the whole Upper East Side to see. I turned away, each step feeling heavier than concrete blocks. The mansion doors shut behind me. The New York night air slapped me in the face, cold enough to slice right to the bone. I looked up at the neon lights blinking on the towers across the street. I wondered, was every dream I ever painted just a pile of meaningless colors? I fished through my pockets. My wallet was empty. All my credit cards were controlled by my dad. They were probably already frozen. I'd only been in New York for less than 6 months, hadn't made any real friends, just flaky artist acquaintances. All I had left was a few $100 in cash and an old phone. Where to now, Max? Crawl back and beg for his forgiveness? I asked myself, though I already knew the answer. I sniffed, wiped my face with my sleeve. I looked up and saw a massive MoMA billboard. Reimagine the future. I let out a bitter laugh. I used to dream my paintings would hang there one day. Now I was just another lost soul wandering the streets. I walked down the sidewalk, past honking taxis and a Jeep blasting hip-hop. Tonight, New York glittered like a Broadway show, and I was completely out of tune. A piece of graffiti caught my eye, a man screaming, colors spilling everywhere like my own raw emotions. I stopped and stared. Even if he shredded my painting, there's still a whole world out here waiting for me to paint, I thought. But was I strong enough to survive? Tomorrow, would I be passed out on a freezing sidewalk, or would I vanish into the shadows, forgotten like some ghost? I pulled up my hood and kept walking, each step crunching over the shards of my old dreams. But deep in my chest, my heart kept pounding, a stubborn beat telling me something inside me wasn't dead yet. Maybe, just maybe, this was the exact moment a true artist is born. Tonight, rain drizzled endlessly over New York. I huddled against the edge of an old phone booth near the subway station. Each drop trickled into my hair, down my neck, slicing through the last scraps of pride I had left. I watched people rush past, raincoats shimmering under streetlights, not a single soul noticing the drenched guy curled up in the dark corner. I pulled out my phone. The screen cracked and smeared with water. My bank account, frozen. I tried calling a few old classmates, but all I got were cold, automated replies. This number is not accepting calls. Was I naive to think I'd always have somewhere to go back to? At that moment, a luxury car glided by and stopped at a red light. Inside, a man in a sleek suit had his arm wrapped around a blonde woman, his hand slipping up her thigh as they devoured each other's lips. Her eyes sparkled, lips slightly parted, whispering something that looked wickedly seductive. For a fleeting second, I craved that world, the raw, decadent kind of life I once watched from afar. I wondered, if I had followed my father's path, inherited the real estate throne, would I be sipping 18-year-old whiskey in a penthouse right now, a woman in a satin red dress curled across my lap? Or would I still be dying slowly without a paintbrush in my hand? I let out a raspy laugh, echoing and dissolving into the rain. I curled forward, arms wrapped around my chest, like I was cradling the last bit of warmth inside me. How did it come to this? Was he sitting comfortably in his heated room right now, savoring his drink, thinking of his pathetic son? I pushed myself up and shuffled toward Times Square, hoping the blazing lights might momentarily scare away the loneliness. I wondered, among this ocean of people, would anyone ever stop and really see me? Or would it just be the giant LED screens mocking me, reminding me of my invisibility? I passed a graffiti piece, smudged and bleeding from the rain. I knelt down and found an old wooden board and a few discarded spray cans. My fingers trembled like they were begging for release. I dropped to my knees, picked up a can, shaking. "What the hell are you doing, Max?" I asked myself. But then I started spraying. Each line ripped through the damp darkness. Each color screamed out of my chest like a raw howl. A homeless man nearby stared, mouth open. "Yo, man, that's crazy. You an artist," he stammered. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time I felt someone actually saw me, even if it was just for a second. I nodded. "Yeah, I guess I am." When I finished, I propped the board against the wall. Rain streaked down, making the colors run like bleeding wounds. I stared at it, a face screaming, eyes bursting with fear and defiance. That was me. That was tonight. That was every moment I'd ever been despised. I wondered, was this the last time I'd ever paint? Or the first time I truly painted for myself, not for a prize, not for praise? I sat down next to it. Rain kept hammering down, cold enough to gnaw straight into my bones. I lifted a shaky hand to my eyes and broke down. Bitter tears mixed with the rain dripped down my chin, splashing onto the trash-littered street. Hunger started clawing at my insides. I rummaged through my pocket. All I had was a crumpled 20. I could get a cheap sandwich or save it for tomorrow. But would I even make it to tomorrow? I watched people pass, headlights reflecting off my soaked face. I wondered, if one of them stopped, reached out a hand, would I have the guts to take it, or would I turn it down out of pride? That stupid pride my father had drilled into me since I was a kid. Just then, the sounds of car horns, club beats, and rain all tangled together into a chaotic symphony only New York could compose. I looked up at the glowing billboards, feeling them sneer, "You're nothing." I hugged the wooden board to my chest, whispering to myself, even if everyone turns their back, I still have my paint. But then I asked, is that really enough to survive? A strong gust slammed into me, carrying the stench of gasoline and damp trash. I shivered violently, hands clenched so tight my teeth rattled. I had never felt so small, so insignificant. But right then, a spark flickered in my mind. If I have nothing left to lose, what the hell do I have to fear? I stood up and limped toward a bright corner of Times Square. The neon lights danced across the wet pavement, bouncing in my tired eyes. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but at least tonight, I was still here. Was this the first step toward rebuilding, or the beginning of my final collapse? I shuffled along the slick sidewalk, my breath thick like heavy smoke. The flickering lights of Times Square washed over my swollen, rain-battered face. I kept wondering, was tonight going to be my last night alive, or would some miracle pull me out of this abyss? I stopped near a crowded corner where a few street artists were sketching quick portraits for tourists. Each drawing went for $20 or $30, cash flying into their hands like cotton candy at a carnival. I watched them, feeling an itch spark in my fingers. I needed to draw. I had to draw. I grabbed a torn piece of cardboard from a nearby trash bin, wiped off the mud as best as I could. I laid out the last few markers I had, hands trembling as I set up on the curb. I scribbled a small sign, "Portrait, pay what you feel." A desperate plea for money, and maybe, just maybe, a sliver of recognition. The first to stop was a group of college students. A girl with bright blue hair giggled, pointing at me. "Look at this sad puppy. Should we let him draw us?" Each word sliced me like a razor, but I nodded. As soon as the marker touched cardboard, my mind went blank. All the exhaustion vanished. There was only her, and the lines slowly coming to life. When I handed her the finished portrait, she froze for a second. "Wow, that's actually good," she mumbled, shoving a crumpled $10 bill into my hand before the group disappeared into the crowd. I clenched the money like it was my first real heartbeat in days. One person after another, one line after another. The rain kept falling, sometimes heavy, sometimes just a steady whisper like a tear that never dried. I lost count of how many portraits I finished. All I remembered were the fleeting looks of surprise, the fragile "thank you" slipping away into the night. Around midnight, my back screaming and my hands shaking, a woman stopped in front of me. She looked about 60, silver hair neatly pinned, wrapped in a sleek black trench coat. Her dark brown eyes felt like they were scanning my entire soul. "Could you draw me?" she asked, her voice low, steady, but somehow incredibly gentle. I nodded, starting to sketch. For the first time in hours, I felt myself sink fully into the flow of ink, every line peeling off a layer of my spirit and laying it bare on that cardboard. "My name's Linda," she said softly as I worked. "I used to paint too, but now I critique." I paused briefly and looked up. Her gaze held no mockery, no pity, only a quiet focus, like she saw the rawest version of me. "Whose son sits out here drawing in the rain at night?" Linda asked, half joking, half deeply sincere. I bit my lip. I had a father once, but he never understood." She stayed silent, only nodding. I saw her eyes glisten slightly, as if my answer reopened an old wound in her own heart. I handed her the finished portrait. She stared at it for a long moment, then gave me a small, knowing smile. "Do you see it?" she asked. I shook my head, confused. "There's a deep pain here, but underneath, there's a fierce, unstoppable life force. I haven't seen that look in any high-end gallery for years," she whispered, almost like it was meant only for me. I swallowed hard. In that moment, I felt like someone had reached in and touched the darkest, deepest corner of my chest. Linda opened her bag and pulled out a business card. "I'm curating an underground art event next week for emerging artists. I want you to be there." I took the card, my hand trembling uncontrollably. I don't have any pieces, no studio, no gallery, nothing." Linda tilted her head, smiling. "You have yourself. That's enough." She turned and disappeared into the night, her black trench coat fading like smoke in the rain. I sat there stunned, wondering, was this real or just some fever dream my starving brain conjured to save me? I looked down at the card. Linda Harper, art critic and curator. I wondered, if I showed up, would it drown me all over again? Or was this the sliver of light I'd been waiting for? I pressed the card against my chest, feeling my heartbeat spiral out of control, breath shallow and quick. That night, I stayed on that curb until dawn, thinking of brush strokes, fireplaces, and my father's hands tearing apart my work. And for the first time, amidst the smell of rain and gasoline, I believed. Maybe, just maybe, I still had a shot at living as my true self. I woke up on a bench inside an abandoned train station in Brooklyn, the early sun slicing through a broken window and stabbing my face like tiny knives. I dragged myself upright, surrounded by the stench of mold and discarded food containers. In my hand, I was still clutching Linda's business card, Linda Harper, art critic and curator. I traced her name with my finger, wondering, was this just another trap or the first real miracle of my life? I didn't dare believe it yet, but maybe, just maybe, if there was even the faintest glimmer of light, I had to try. I stumbled outside, my head spinning. I needed a space to prepare for the underground show Linda had invited me to. Images began crashing through my mind. My father standing in that ballroom, the sound of my painting being torn apart echoing like a scream. I asked myself, could this pain become art, or was it just a scar that would haunt me forever? I walked for hours until I found an abandoned warehouse by the East River. The smell of rust mixed with the river's cold breeze made me shiver, but deep down, I knew this was the place. No pristine white walls, no fancy spotlights, just cracked concrete, peeling paint, and walls that looked like open wounds. I dragged in scrap wood, salvaged old window frames to use as makeshift easels, and I started to paint. No sketches, no prep, just pure rage, defiance, and pain spilling out. I painted my father with hollow eyes and a gaping mouth, screaming. I painted invisible hands tearing my soul apart, my own face shredded to pieces, flames and ash swirling around everything. I ripped my shirt off, sweat dripping onto the concrete floor, mixing with the smell of paint to create something intoxicating and feral. I wondered, if he could see this, would he recognize the sun he once spat on, now living through every single brush stroke? The next day, Linda arrived. The echo of her heels rang through the empty space, snapping me out of my trance. She wore her black trench coat again, her dark eyes glittering with a cold light. "Did you hear the news?" she asked, her voice so calm it was almost terrifying. I looked up, my hands still covered in paint. "Your father hired a well-known art blogger to spread a story accusing you of plagiarism. They published it today, claiming you stole a Japanese artist's style to get attention," she said slowly, each word crashing against my chest like a hammer. I froze. He didn't just want me out of his house. He wanted to kill the last bit of hope I had left. Linda stepped closer and handed me a stack of papers, email exchanges between my father and that blogger. This is your proof. I won't watch a true talent get buried under a pile of lies. My entire body shook as I took the papers. My blood felt like it was boiling. I remembered his eyes when he shredded my painting, the snide laughs from my relatives, the feeling of being thrown out into the freezing night. I can help you go public with this, but the choice is yours, Linda said, locking eyes with me, unblinking. I took a deep breath, the smell of paint flooding my brain. My heart pounded like a war drum, as if the entire universe was waiting for my answer. I thought of my father's words, "You're not worthy of the Miller name if you choose this path." I burst out laughing, a hoarse, raw sound echoing through the warehouse. I'm not worthy of the Miller name, but I am worthy of myself. Linda's lips curled into a small, approving smile. She nodded. Then get ready. I'll set up an interview with Art Weekly. We're going to expose everything. I clutched the papers tight, like I was holding my own beating heart. Did I have the strength to endure what was coming? Or was this going to be the final blow that finished me off for good? That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in that concrete tomb, writing every story, every memory. I thought about all those nights I painted under my desk lamp, the times someone spilled wine on my canvases, every time I was called worthless. I poured it all into my interview draft, each word slicing away the invisible chains that had bound me for so long. As the Brooklyn night swallowed me whole, I looked up at my paintings drying on the walls. In that moment, I wondered, was this the first time I was truly alive? And tomorrow, when every secret finally comes to light, would I finally be free? Or would I be crushed for the last time? News of the interview exploded online just hours after Art Weekly dropped their digital issue. I sat curled up in the corner of the warehouse, staring at my old phone screen, barely at 10%, as notifications kept slamming into my eyes. Max Miller exposes smear campaign by his own father. The story of an artist disowned by his family. The son who chose art over legacy to keep his soul alive. I read each headline, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I kept asking myself, was I dreaming, or would this all disappear like those sketches I used to crumple and toss away? Another notification popped up. Influencer @ArtByNina shares Max's work, calls it New York's most beautiful scream of the year. My heart seized. Nina, one of the most influential art voices in the city, known for turning unknowns into overnight stars with a single post. I jumped up, running around the warehouse like a wild animal. I screamed, slapped my hands against the concrete walls, the smell of paint, sweat, and dust swirling around me like a drug. I collapsed, laughing hoarsely. All those years, I thought my voice would only ever echo off my bedroom walls. Now, it was echoing across all of New York. Linda appeared, stepping through the rested doorway. Her face was still stern, but her eyes glowed sharp and alive. "See, you thought he was destroying you, but really, he just gave you the push to be seen." I let out a raw laugh, grabbing her shoulders. I don't even know what to say. I never imagined I'd see my name on screens all over this city. She patted my back, her voice low but warm. "Now, get ready for the show. There's no turning back." I nodded, swallowing hard. I turned to the row of paintings leaning against the walls, each one alive with frantic brushstrokes, dried sweat, and crusted nosebleeds. I wondered, when strangers look at these, will they see my desperation carved into every line, or just another trendy, viral artist? On opening night, I wore a black shirt, still smudged with paint, my hair messily combed, my hands trembling like I was holding a knife. The warehouse was cleared out. Industrial lights hung in jagged lines, creating broken shards of brightness. The smell of rust, paint, and cigarettes from other artists mixed into a chaotic perfume. I stepped outside and saw the line of people snaking around the block. There was the blue-haired girl who'd paid me for a street portrait, the homeless man who watched me spray paint that wooden board, and countless strangers with eyes burning with curiosity. A Vice TV cameraman shoved a lens in my face. Rapid-fire questions. "Do you think your father will show up tonight?" I froze, my mind going blank. Then I laughed, shook my head. "I don't know, but if he does, at least tonight, I don't have to bow my head anymore." That answer shot across Twitter instantly. Someone shouted, "Max, Max." Then the crowd joined in, clapping and chanting, a roaring wave crashing over me. I wondered, was this the final dream before I snapped awake? Linda pulled me inside, guiding me to the centerpiece, the biggest painting, the ashes of a name. I looked at it, my father's face, mouth open in a silent scream, eyes hollow, flames consuming him piece by piece. I painted it on that last night, so exhausted I nearly blacked out. "You ready?" Linda whispered in my ear, her breath soft but cold as Brooklyn night wind on a bridge. I inhaled deeply and nodded. I stepped into the main room. Applause cracked through the air, colliding with camera shutters, live stream alerts, and the pulsing electronic beats from a DJ in the back. I looked up, realizing for the first time just how high the ceiling was. It felt like staring at the sky, tasting true freedom for the first time. I raised my hand, feeling all the gazes pierce into me, but the pain was gone. I wondered, that night, if I had fallen to my knees in front of the fireplace, would this moment even exist? I smiled, then silently whispered to myself, "Thank you, Dad, for tearing up my painting." That night, among the cheers and the haze of cigarette smoke, I realized, for the first time in my life, I was truly born. While I was busy greeting people and signing posters for these new fans, Linda came rushing over, her face pale, clutching her phone tight. "Max, he's here," she said, her voice raspy, like it might disappear any second. I froze. Every sound around me vanished. All I could hear was my own heart pounding against my ribs like a sledgehammer. I turned slowly toward the main entrance, and then I saw him, my father, William Miller. His once flawless gray suit, now wrinkled and damp, his tie hanging loose, hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. His face was gaunt, his eyes lost, like a ghost drifting through a crowd that didn't belong to him. In his hand, he clutched an exhibition ticket, soaked, frayed at the corner. Security guards were stopping him. He held up his shaking hand, desperate. "Please, I have to get in. I'm Max's father." I started moving toward the door, every step heavy enough to crack the floor beneath me. All eyes in the warehouse swung to me. Cameras zoomed in. LED lights flickered like lightning bolts. I wondered, why was he here? To apologize? To reclaim his honor? Or to steal one last piece of me? Our eyes locked. In that instant, I didn't see the man who ripped my paintings or threw me out into the cold anymore. I saw a broken old man, trembling in an unfamiliar world, his eyes flooded with fear and regret. "Max, son," he stammered, reaching out, like a child flailing in a raging ocean. I stood still. Hot air burned through my nose. My fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. I remembered the freezing rain, my hands shaking from hunger, that painting he threw into the fire. I took one more step, standing right on the edge between light and shadow. I tilted my head slightly, my voice low enough for only him to hear. "That night, you called my work trash. Now you want to buy a ticket to see that trash." He stumbled, his lips quivering. "Max, I was wrong. Please, just let me in, just once." A hush rippled through the crowd. Cameras zoomed in on his tear-streaked face. Linda stood behind me, silent, but I could hear her swallowing hard, holding herself back from saying anything. I looked up at the harsh industrial lights above me, feeling like I was standing on the biggest stage of my life. I wondered, forgiveness or exposure? I took a deep breath, then stepped back. "I'm sorry, but tonight you're just another audience member, and the audience waits in line like everyone else." He crumpled to the ground, clutching his head, his shoulders heaving. The guards gently but firmly pulled him aside, guiding him to the ticket line. The crowd parted. Some took pictures, some filmed, some just shook their heads in pity. I turned back in silence and walked straight into the heart of the exhibition. Each step felt like tearing away the last thread binding me to him. Linda touched my shoulder lightly. Her eyes were sad, but there was a proud glimmer shining through. "You did it," she whispered. I let out a faint smile. Finally, I'm not screaming in the dark anymore. I stopped in front of the largest painting, The Ashes of a Name. I stared at it for a long time, seeing myself clearly for the first time outside my father's warped mirror. I wondered, if he hadn't shown up tonight, would I still have felt this desperate need to win? Or would I have stayed that shivering shadow on the fringe? The electronic music pulsed harder, lights flickered, making the frame tremble slightly. The crowd surged toward me, chanting my name. But in my head, I still heard his words, "You're not worthy of the Miller name." I smiled and looked up at the concrete ceiling, no tears this time. I knew my father could destroy everything around me, but he could never destroy my spirit. And in that exact moment, amid the roars and flashing lights, I finally understood. I wasn't painting to survive anymore. I was alive to paint.